There's a mistake. Moonlight, you guys won Best Picture.
You like me. Right now. You like me.
Ever since I was a little kid, I wanted this.
Mom, I just want an Oscar.
I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of the Ultimate Oscar Showdown. And this week we're going to be continuing our look at the Best Supporting Actress category by breaking down the winners from the 1980s. But if you're new to the series, what I do on this series every single week is tier rank winners from a certain Oscar category, from S tier being the highest to D tier being the lowest. We're at the end of the series now. Next week will be the final episode of the season before we jump into the Olds Oscar Countdown, season 8 of that, which is this channel's flagship series where I predict the Oscars and cover the Oscars every week, multiple times a week, all the way leading up to them. So we're going to start into that season, but you guys have been showing a lot of support for this channel. I'm very grateful for what you guys have continued to show the support throughout the summer, commenting below, letting me know your thoughts, your personal tier rankings. I still love hearing that. So even though we're at the end of the series, please do feel free to comment down below. And if you came along for this series, please do subscribe to the channel and keep on watching as we transition back into the Olds Oscar Countdown series. I think if you enjoyed this series, you'll definitely enjoy sort of keeping up with the race of a modern day Oscar season. Or if this is your first video and you're coming back in anticipation for the Olds Oscar Countdown, check out some of my other videos in this series. I tier ranked Oscar winners from the Best Picture category, Best Lead Actress, Best Lead Actor, and then both Supporting Actor categories as well. So, you've probably seen a lot of those films being an Oscar fan, so you can hear my personal thoughts as to which ones I thought were a little bit better than the others and which ones were sort of in that sort of elite S tier versus ones I had some controversial opinions on. You can check back on this channel for the archives. But without further ado, let's jump into this video while we can, starting off with the 1980 video, Mary Steenburgen for Melvin and Howard. And this is a really super fun, sweet performance, and actually an Oscar win I forget exists at times, but one I'm always glad to hear about. And I think what's so great about Steenburgen's performance is the total commitment that she has. This is a definite comedy kind of a movie, but one that has a very unique tone. In the same way, you'd say a Wes Anderson movie is a comedy, but it's not a comedy like Anchorman is a comedy. It's got its own sort of unique tone and vibe and energy. I think Melvin and Howard is similar in that way. And what's so great about Steenburgen's performance in this movie is that she's able to recognize the tone of the film. You see, that's kind of an underrated skill that we've talked about on the series before for an actor, which is to match the tone of the movie, to understand movie they're in and then understand their role within that movie and commit to that. I think Steenburgen really understands kind of the unique, quirky, fun energy of this film. I mean, there's many instances in the movie where it's ridiculous. This is a very absurd story. This man who said he met Howard Hughes is the sole heir to his great fortune, and then in this movie Steenburgen plays his wife, who's a stripper, sort of go-go dancer, and then also has to support her husband and the family that they build together. And it could be easy to kind of have this performance be a little bit of a wink and a nod, almost be meta in the way like, oh, I know this is a silly performance and I'm sort of trying to be self-conscious and push myself away from that. But I don't think Steenburgen does it in this movie. I think she totally commits to this premise. She plays everything straight. She doesn't play this as a comedy, that this is ridiculous. She plays this as this sort of serious, she's not serious in the movie, but she plays it very straight, and then this is the event sequences of events that are happening in her life. And I think as a result, makes it a lot funnier, also makes her performance a lot more sweet and humanistic, because she treats this person as a real life person rather than just a person that's there to serve the comedy, but actually a real life person with thoughts and desires and dreams and wants this family to work well. So that adds the emotional element too. So I think this is an underseen movie. And Jonathan Demme, who's a great director. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. And Steenburgen is so fun and lovable and sweet in the movie that she's hard not to enjoy. So I think even if you haven't seen the movie, or if you even don't like the movie, you will enjoy her performance like I did. So for me, great performance that will go into the A tier. Then the 1981 winner, Maureen Stapleton for Reds, playing a notable activist that started to gain more notoriety sort of in the 70s with second wave feminism, anarchist, communist activists during this time period, so the early 1900s. And this is, I think, a situation where the Academy appreciated her portrayal of this real-life person, and they really liked Maureen Stapleton, and it was a bit of a legacy award. That's not to say she's bad in the movie. She's just not in it a lot. But she is good at being sort of the part motherly figure, part mentor figure, I think, to Warren Beatty's character. She's very great at, despite her being older within the film, her character has a strong, sort of fiery passion for the activism that she's doing, and you usually see that with more youthful characters, but she still has that sort of youthful energy, which I think she's able to bring out, and it is in the movie in a couple key scenes in which she is solid in. It's just hard for me to really celebrate the performance because when you think about the movie, you think about Diane Keaton and Warren Beatty and Jack Nicholson. She's just not in the movie a lot. I think this was more of a situation of people liking the real-life portrayal of the character, and then ultimately I think Maureen Stapleton being well liked and them liking the movie read, so she sort of just came along the ride. So good for what she's in. She's just not in a lot of the movie, so it doesn't have that memorable performance that you want out of a supporting role. So for me, I'm gonna have to put this one in the C tier. Then the 1982 winner, Jessica Lange for Tootsie, which was a movie I decided to re-watch to try to figure out why the Academy connected with this performance, and I struggled with it the second time around. I still don't totally understand why people connected to Lange here. I think it was a situation where she broke out onto the scene so powerfully in King Kong, and then quickly started to develop her reputation within the Academy and being well respected. She's been nominated multiple times. She's won twice. We've already covered her with her performance in Blue Sky. But she's essentially there to be the object of affection for Hoffman's character and isn't allowed to do much. And she is good, I think, actually at the very end of the movie. She has this sort of nice romantic back and forth with Hoffman's character at the very end. But the unfortunate sort of construction of the film is that she is the one to be pined after, and she can't really reciprocate that because she doesn't know she's being pined after, essentially. So she's sort of being left to her own devices to sort of go about her life. And while we connect more so to Hoffman's character, and it's not until the end in which we actually kind of get a true back and forth where she can act across Hoffman, I think, effectively, rather than just being a tool for the advancement of the plot. But because most of the movie is one-sided, Lange just doesn't get enough opportunities, and it is sort of a confounding win in that regard. I don't walk out of the movie in Tootsie and go like, wow, Lange, what a standout. She's, this incredible actress. She's, serviceable within the movie, but nothing special. And I think most people, when you think of Tootsie, you don't really think of how great Jessica Lange is in the movie. Maybe I'm wrong. You can let me know in the comments down below. I know this is a very beloved movie. A movie I like, by the way, but just didn't really connect with Lange's performance in particular. But, she's not bad in the movie or anything. She's solid, so it will go in the C tier. Then the 1983 winner, Linda Hunt from The Year Living Dangerously. A super under-discussed movie from one of the most underrated directors of all time, being Peter Weir, director of Dead Poets Society and Master and Commander and Truman Show. We don't really think about him like that, but he really is, I think, a really great director and has delivered so many great movies. And this was during the period sort of in the early Australian period, in the early 80s there, before he breaks really in America in the late 80s and into the 90s and throughout the 90s. And here Hunt plays a complicated character in that she probably wouldn't have been cast today for this role, but even at the time it was controversial casting. Even when she won, there was some complicated feelings about it, because this is a woman who's playing a Chinese Australian dwarf man. So it's a real sort of stretch of a performance, and I think that Hunt does actually a really terrific job at it. I think Hunt and Weir both take a sensitivity to the role that I think is required for this type of performance. It's not, I think, blatantly insensitive, and I think there is a real transformation that Hunt goes for the film, and I think that's why she was ultimately appreciated. Because not only is it a standout movie, standout performance in the movie, it's also a very transformative performance, which I think the Academy enjoys. Playing Billy as this sort of jaded protagonist, but also happens to be the moral core of the film, to remind our characters that they're not in a place that they know, they don't understand the history, they're sort of out of place, whereas Billy is a little bit more connected to the history of the place. Just even the way she wears the clothes or maneuvers around in the city, she feels like she's been there a long time. She feels like she knows the place and sort of is on the ground and with the people. And she's sort of always within the film being used to remind us of the people, of what's going on within the country and who is affecting sort of the face of it in that way. And Billy's just a character that really feels, and Linda Hunt, I think, is able to communicate that to us. We understand that this is sort of an open-hearted man going through these situation and feeling for everybody, and I think Hunt makes us able to understand why this person feels that way and makes us ultimately empathize with the overall story through her character. So while the performance may not have been played by the 2023 version of Linda Hunt, I still think it was an excellent performance and a great portrayal here, and a moving portrayal within the film. So for me, it will go into the A tier. Then the 1984 winner, Peggy Ashcroft, for A Passage to India. In David Lean's last film based on the E.M. Forster novel, here Peggy Ashcroft plays the mother of our lead protagonist, Adela, and is really, in similar ways actually to Linda Hunt's character in The Year of Living Dangerously, Ashcroft's character here is kind of the moral center of the film, the character that we like, at least the originally British character that we like. And I think she has a great representation of what is, I'd call, classically British nobility, in that there's a certain stiff upper lip reservedness of, I guess you would say British culture, at least portrayed in film, but there's also sort of a sense of class and respect that is one side of that. I think Ashcroft is able to do that. She's clearly sort of disgusted by the way the British are treating the Indians, and has these moral outcries towards that, which as a result makes her sort of very likable and understandable, because she's really the only person that has, we'll call them, modern views. The movie's a period piece, but I think that's sort of the modern day viewpoint at the time of what the British did in that country. But also the way she executes that, and the way Ashcroft approaches this sort of moral outcry is fascinating, because she feels very realistic to an English woman of this time. She's not going to yell and scream and try to, change the system at once. She does it in a very sort of subtle, respected, restrained, but very intelligent way of sort of pointing out some of the flaws and moral hypocrisies within the film. I think that gives us a sense of likability within her character, but also just the way she goes about doing it makes sense, and there's believability to it for a British woman during this time, which I think Ashcroft is able to really pick out and understand. Right, this is how this person would do it, and it feels true and authentic because of that. Ultimately, she's asked to be kind of a side character within the story, so she doesn't get a lot to do. It is somewhat of a performance where you go, well, I kind of wish there was a little bit more of her, but she's just not one of the sort of key characters, I think, to the second half of the film, so she's sort of pushed away because of that. But still, you can't blame Ashcroft on that really solid performance that will go into the B tier. Then the 1985 winner, Anjelica Huston, for Prizzi's Honor. And this is a super strange movie with kind of a confusing plot, and Anjelica Huston's role in particular is kind of confusing in that, because the main storyline is Jack Nicholson's character, who's an assassin for the mob, who teams up with his eventual wife, Kathleen Turner, who is also sort of an assassin, doer, and criminal type figure. And Anjelica Huston's character is always sort of being cut back to as an ex of Jack Nicholson's character, where she's sort of helping to explain the plot or explain who's trying to kill who and some of the conniving elements of that. And it can be confusing at times, but so I had some issues with that ultimately, but I think Huston as a performer is adding so much to the character. She makes her so interesting. She makes her a real sort of conniving, evil person, but a charmingly evil in the way, charmingly deceptive, just fun in the way you can see how she's pulling the strings and the way she's using politics to help her on her side and to manipulate people. There's sort of a sociopathic element to that, but I think Huston brings enough sort of charm and beauty to the role that makes it sort of fun and devilish is, I think, the best word to describe her performance. So I think she understands her appeal in terms of her beauty, which she utilizes against Nicholson's character, but then also how she can leverage that to get what she wants and get sort of back in with the good graces of the mob family. So a solid performance that is probably, I think, the most enjoyable part of the movie for me, that will go into the B tier. Then the 1986 winner, Dianne Wiest, for Hannah and Her Sisters. And Here Wiest plays a very specific character. Well, I like to call her the chaotic friend. The friend who's sort of got all these things going on at once, and there's always chaos, and things are never peaceful, and she's got one job, but then she's got another job, and her life is always interesting because there's always something happening to her, but there's never sort of a sense of calm or peace or just things going fine. There's always some new big story to tell, and that's a specific kind of a person, but one that I think Wiest absolutely sort of channels and embodies. Almost got this sort of ADHD type energy, this nervous energy, in the way she stutters at some of her dialogue and moves rapidly. You understand that her brain's sort of moving a mile a minute, and she's getting all these ideas and then pouncing on one and pouncing on one and sort of can't decide. And she's got that indecisiveness, which I think works well with Alan's films in particular, because so many of Alan's movies, when he's the protagonist, as he is in this movie, or at least one of the protagonists, there's a sense of sort of neurosis energy within the movie. And I think Wiest is able to sort of show a different side of that. She's not neurotic. She's sort of hopelessly ignorant in many ways, but still matches that chaotic energy. So she's a different side of the sort of neuroticism that Alan brings, in that she's not neurotic, but she matches the same sort of energy of Alan's character in some of the chaos that she brings. So I think she's able to sort of buoy in many ways her storyline within the film. And then Wiest as a performer is still, I think, brings an element of sweetness and kindness to her performance and to her role, so you always sort of like her in general, so you still feel for her character. So I think Wiest also adds that to performance as well, sort of being able to specifically understand this kind of a person and match the energy within the tone, whether it be the dialogue, whether it be the movement of her hands, the way she says things. She just is sort of fits very well within the film and within this Woody Allen universe. So another solid Dianne Wiest performance that won her an Oscar, this time for the first Woody Allen film. She wins a little bit later for Bullets Over Broadway, which we talked about last week. But a great performance for me. Probably my preferred performance over Bullets Over Broadway too. So it will go into the B tier. Then the 1987 winner, Olympia Dukakis for Moonstruck. And in many ways, this performance reminds me of Ben Johnson's in The Last Picture Show, just because we talked about on that episode, he's not a real big protagonist in the movie. He's just a really great supporting performance that has a couple of great scenes in a movie I really like. And I think Dukakis is similar here, where if she was in a movie I didn't like, her performance probably would have been maybe bumped down a tier. But at the end of the day, I'm a human being with preferences, and this is my list, and I really like Moonstruck, so there's an element of pushing her up because of that. But that being said, I still think Dukakis gives a really terrific and excellent performance in her supporting scenes that she does get. You know, when you get older, I always think that there's sort of two routes that you can go. You can be the grumpy old man who hates the world, or you can be sort of the sweet, loving grandmother. There's sort of, you know, options that you can go to that at least stereotypically old people will fall into. And yet Dukakis, I think, is able to sort of accomplish both. She's got some incredibly comedic, acidic kind of lined deliveries, a lot of oh boys kind of energy within the movie, and just how sometimes negative she can be, or kind of grumpy in a certain way. That being said, she can also, I think, be sweet too, because you understand her intentions. You understand that she worries for her daughter. She wants her to fall in love, but she also realizes the sort of messiness of the situation, which leads to the drama of the film. But in particular, there's a scene with John Mahoney in the film where she invites him over to dinner, and you can just see her on her facial reactions sort of force a sort of half smile, give a little bit of a half smile. And I think that's sort of a perfect encapsulation of her talents and her skill within the film. It's because she's going to sort of begrudgingly do the right thing, but she will always do the right thing. You understand in that scene that her heart's in the right place, that she wants the right things, but she still will be sort of critical and harsh and a little bit brutally honest in that way in which she goes about them. But at the end of the day, she still, you know, invited the man to dinner and decided to give him some advice and tried to, you know, be nice to him at that time because she felt like that was the right thing, even though she'll be sort of blunt to him and direct to him. In the same way, I think she has that relationship with her daughter and with a lot of people. So she has a little bit of the sweet, she has a little bit of the acid as well, and Dukakis, I think, balances that very well in a really great performance in a movie I also really like. So at the end of the day, that just helps too. So I like this performance a lot. So we'll go into the A tier. Then the 1988 winner, Geena Davis for The Accidental Tourist, which is performance, I think, is maybe the invention of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. That's a trope that I thought was sort of developed in the early 2000s. I think it was at least described that way with movies like Elizabethtown and then into, I guess you would say, 500 Days of Summer. And if you don't know the sort of, I guess it's an online term, but it's a term in films to describe this sort of flawless, quirky, very interesting, perfect girl that would enter into sort of a generic guy's life and turn everything around. And it's somewhat of a lazy screenwriting trope, and I think in this movie there's a bit of that where you really question whether, at least on paper, why her character likes William Hurt's character, because he's so depressive and kind of uninteresting. But in terms of the performance, because sometimes you have to separate the character from the performance, Davis does everything she can to try to inject life and interest into this person. Even though there's certain questions as to the motives as to why this person is going to fall in love with William Hurt's character, we don't question that she is in love with William Hurt's character. We don't, in some other sort of poorer movies, you'd be like, why is she falling in love with them? And then also the performance is not giving me anything and explaining anything why they're falling in love with them. On this movie, the character doesn't really make sense why she liked this man. But Davis's performance is telling us a lot. She's very clearly from the get-go very into this man, tries to do these different ways to force their happenings. She's clearly, giddy over him when he's around. Even with the relationship, she really sort of appreciates that. And I think Davis on the other scenes also adds a sense of charm and sort of charisma and a quirkiness that can be kind of annoying at times, but I think Davis almost leans really into it, so that's almost the charm of her because of how sort of high energy and upbeat she can be at so many instances within the film. So the character, I think, is poorly written, and the movie's very strange, but just for the task of trying to inject any life into this character, I thought Davis did an excellent job at that. So for me, her performance will go into the B tier. Then the 1989 winner, Brenda Fricker, for My Left Foot, who's probably most well known to people of my generation and of that time of the old bird lady in Home Alone 2. And in that movie, she has a certain level of sort of warmth and sweetness, which I also think she first showed off in My Left Foot here, and the reason why she won the Oscar. So even if you haven't seen My Left Foot, if you've seen Home Alone 2, it's sort of a similar performance. And I think Fricker, just as an actress, has a real sort of naturalistic warmth to her. She's painted within the movie as somewhat of a saintly figure because she has so much patience to deal with Christy Brown, Daniel Day-Lewis's character, as a younger boy, and as he gets older, as the sort of person who's going to take the time to help him develop and get past his disability to live as best of a life as he can. So because of that, she's sort of painted as a saintly figure, and Fricker, I think, leans into that as well, being very warm, being very kind, reserved, and very smart and intelligent and warm in her line deliveries and some of the speeches in which she ultimately gives to him. There's a sense of truth and honesty that she brings. So just as her natural warmth and charm and energy, I think, as a performer, adds so much to this particular performance. It's a great marriage, I think, of character and performance. And Fricker nails the sort of monthly figure within this movie quite well. So for me, good performance that will go into the B tier. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Take a look at my list. I thought this was overall, a pretty good list as a whole. Even if we didn't have any S tiers, they're all sort of at least really good to solid performances in most of the films. But let me know in the comments down below if you have any of your personal thoughts and different rankings. I still love to hear that, as I mentioned at the top of the show. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Stay tuned to next week, where we're going to be doing the final episode of this series, and then subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my old Oscar Countdown series. We're not going away. Every week you can expect a video from this channel. We won't go away about that, so still keep on tuning in because I do appreciate the views and you guys returning every week. It does mean a lot. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, stay tuned.